Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Schmucke. I'm the founder of EdWeb, and it was really a great honor for me to introduce our presentation today. We are so honored to be able to do these presentations, which are interviews with recipients of the Medal of Honor, the Congressional Medal of Honor. And our recipient who is being interviewed today is Gordon R. Roberts, who served in Vietnam. And he is going to be interviewed by Kathy Ellers-Metcalf, who's the Vice President of Education for the Congressional Medal of Honor Foundation. So I believe that this is our 16th interview with a recipient of the Medal of Honor. So it is really very special work that we do to be able to bring these interviews to classrooms so the teachers and students, particularly at middle school and high school level, can hear directly from American heroes who have served in. We have had presentations from and interviews from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. So Gordon R. Roberts is going to talk to you about his service in Vietnam and also about his life leading up to that and what led him to serve and the work that he has done since then. So I'm going to turn this over to Kathy Metcalf, who will take it from here. Thank you for joining us today.
Unmuted. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the country you are today. We're coming to you from the Airborne and Special Forces Museum in Fayetteville, North Carolina. They have been kind enough to share their space with us today so that we can talk with you. And we have an audience, as I understand, from all across the country, mostly educators and a number of classrooms. I'd like all those of you who are with us and available to ask questions that our first priority will be student questions so that we can get as much information for students as possible so that they can better understand the values and sacrifices that allow them the freedoms that they get to enjoy in this country. So I'm delighted to be here with Gordon, and we have a living history of him on the Medal of Honor website. It is about a 6-minute video, and if you think that video is appropriate for your students, if you haven't shown it to them, you might want to consider it later. There's some great clips on there and some important history. For anyone not familiar with Gordon's story, the very short version is that he is from a small town in Ohio, followed family tradition and joined the Army at 18, and was 20 years old when he was presented the Medal of Honor. Would you tell us a little about what it was like growing up in small town America?
Yeah, and for a number of folks, I see from the list that we have folks, again, all over the country, and I'm sure some are from small towns like I grew up. And like most small towns, was heavily influenced by church, family, but also the community. I lived in a place where literally on Flag Day and what we might consider minor holidays, they would put the flags out, have a parade, and our nation's veterans, particularly the World War II veterans, would march down the street. And I could see how much pride our community had and those that had served. So, those are the social influences that, helped me as a young person grow up and identify what was important.
Okay. Was there a particular moment that you decided to join the Army, or you said your dad was in the Army?
My father was. In fact, he was a paratrooper in World War II in the same unit that I was in later in Vietnam and stuff. A lot of things, I think, pushed me towards the military. Number one, our nation was at war, and it seemed like that's what young people needed to do. Our country, more than anything, has the highest priority for me. Everything that we're able to do, all the freedoms that we enjoy, is because of this great country that we live in, and all of us having an obligation to support that. At the same time, in the 1960s, things were quite different than what we see today. Going to university was next to impossible for anybody except for those that came from a family of means. You simply had to have enough money. You couldn't get a bank loan or something like that to go to school and stuff. So serving in the military was the one avenue that was open to me to be able to go to university after I'd done my service.
So one of the reasons that you decided to join was to be able to take advantage of the GI Bill then and go to school?
Sure, and I'm sure like a few of the young folks that are out there, I came from a family where no one had gone to a university before. No one had a college degree. And I'd set that in high school as an objective for myself. And when you see that door closed to go in through a normal admission process and paying the money necessary to go, you look for another door to open. And of course, the GI Bill that was offered through the military and still offered today was the avenue I chose.
You know, I think a lot of our young students who are growing up in a time when it seems that the expectation is that you will go to college or at least try to go to college may not realize that in the 60s that was relatively new, that those of us who grew up then, many of us were first generation college attendees, and the GI Bill was a great way to get there. Your dad served in World War II, you said?
He did, yes.
Did he come back and go to college? Or
No. He came back. He was a roofer and furnace person, actually.
Mm-hmm. But encouraged you to go to college, evidently.
Very much, yes.
Okay. So you were did you sign up for 3 years? Is that how that went?
Yes. In the 1960s, two things could occur. One, you'd be drafted.
Right.
Or two, you signed up. If you signed up, you had to sign up for a minimum of 3 years. Like today, you're given the opportunity to choose which kind of profession that you'd like to do, such as a medic or communications or something in that line.
So did you serve the entire 3 years, or were you medically discharged?
No, I served the entire 3 years.
Okay. And were you still in the service at the time that you found out that you would be awarded the Medal of Honor?
Yes. In fact, I was about 4 days from being discharged.
Oh. So. Did they not use that as a reason to talk you into staying in the service?
And there was a concerted effort by a number of folks to include the highest ranking officer in the Army, General Westmoreland, sat me down and talked to me. I was young enough at that point, under 21 years of age, wasn't married, so I was eligible to go to West Point.
Oh, wow.
They offered that opportunity, as well as what was called a bootstrap program. It's a little bit different now, but the bottom line is they would have sent me to any university I chose. I would get my normal pay, and they would pay for all the college and everything. The one holdup with that was I was an enlisted soldier, and I enjoyed being an enlisted soldier and thought it was an important job. But they wouldn't send someone to college to be an enlisted soldier. You had to be an officer for that to occur and stuff. And I, at that point in time, did not want to be an officer. That later changed, but that was closed off, and I received 17 scholarship offers from around the country once I'd received the medal. So
wow,
that kind of opened up that opportunity, so I chose that.
So where did you decide to go to school?
I went to the University of Dayton. Again, one of the universities that was offering a full scholarship plus room and board. It was very generous offers from all the universities. Theirs was unique in that the comptroller for the university was a retired Army colonel and kind of understood what I would be going through at that time. So along with the offer of the scholarship was the guarantee of anonymity, that I could go through my 4 years of college without anyone knowing who I was and having to confront during a anti-war years circumstance the fact that I served in the military.
You mentioned at the end of your living history video that we have up on the Medal of Honor website that you, unlike many of the Vietnam vets, came home to a community that was very supportive, that was welcoming and congratulatory, especially regarding your Medal of Honor, and that they were very proud of our servicemen at the time. And I think it's interesting to, because I just now learned that you went to school under the condition of anonymity. Do you think that that made a big difference? Was that something that many of the schools offered, or would that not have been an option elsewhere?
No, it wasn't offered anyplace else. In fact, because you're getting a full scholarship, normally the school would be publicizing that you're coming and so forth. And today that is what occurs, and it can actually be helpful, cathartic for the person that's going to the school. Again, back then the anti-war protests were so predominant in our society, and particularly on our university.
Yes.
Where the young folks were standing up and saying that the war was wrong and that they wanted change, and eventually we were able to effect that change. But for someone like myself, trying to get an education, trying to fit in, go through all the psychological things I was dealing with and everything. The University of Dayton, by offering that, truly did something that was remarkable for me and helped me along the way.
That is a great story there, and that speaks so well of the university to have offered you that and their support of veterans. So, when you went back to school, what did you major in, and where did that lead you?
Yeah, I went back to school in sociology, and then completed a master's degree in social work from the University of Cincinnati, and worked in the juvenile criminal justice system, and then also with SBH, which is severe behavioral handicapped children, and alcohol drug abuse.
That sounds like quite a job, as much so as the Army. But at some point, I know that you went back into the service because you were, I believe, the last of the Medal of Honor recipients from Vietnam to have still been on active duty. Is that right?
That is correct. When I got out of the service, the one thing that I truly wanted to do after all the harm I'd seen done to human beings over Vietnam, I wanted to help. I wanted to live a life where I was focused on helping people and trying to create a better life for them. But I never lost a love for the Army. For 15 years, I continued to get Infantry Magazine or maintain my subscription to Infantry Magazine because I guess I just loved the Army. And because of that, I went back into the National Guard, then eventually back onto active duty, and eventually retired in 2012.
Is that a usual course to go into the National Guard and then back to active duty, aside from just the deployment like we see so often now?
No. Again, it's just I hadn't lost my love for the military, and felt I could make a contribution there, and stuff. But the National Guard, I thought that's what I was going to do, and then the offer to come back on active duty came along, and I chose to do that.
That's great. So the Army got their way with you after all. Huh?
Absolutely.
So we have some questions here that some teachers sent in ahead of time, and students, if you're listening, we would welcome you to also send in your questions, and we will address as many of them as we can. The Medal of Honor Character Program, which you have been so kind to support so generously, is built around the character values of courage, integrity, citizenship, patriotism, commitment, and sacrifice. And one of our teachers asked which character value word is most important to you and why.
Well, I think when you take all of them, a lot of times it's very difficult to differentiate between them. They all seem synonymous with one another in many ways and stuff. But integrity, I think, is the one key word that always sticks out for me. When I joined the military, one of the rules that we had was informal. It wasn't anything written down any place, but it was that you don't lie, you don't steal, you don't cheat, and that you don't tolerate those that do. And that means doing that even when someone's not looking. It means that's what you do all the time with your life. And to be a team member that's valued and able to accomplish the things that you need to accomplish and stuff, it's your integrity that makes that work.
I can see that those values that you, I don't doubt that you were raised with as well, coming from where you did and telling us what you did about small town America and your family, but also I bet that what you learned in the Army came in handy while you were working with the students that you worked with.
Oh, very much.
So you mentioned the things that you don't do, and then that you don't tolerate those that do. That would be a good way for our teachers, I would think, and for our students to think in terms of how they approach the common issue these days of bullying.
Oh, absolutely. I always thought of it typically in terms of cheating on a test or something of that nature, and everything is. It's not only something I don't do, but it's something that I wouldn't tolerate someone else doing because they're cheating themselves in the end run, as well as cheating the rest of the class and stuff. But the bullying is the same thing. You're cheating that person out of what's rightfully theirs and stuff, and to be able to live without that sort of activity going on.
So one of the people who wrote in asked, how would you encourage young people to have the courage to do the right thing, even though it may make them unpopular? And I think that this point about not tolerating those who do things that are wrong fits in with this question. Do you have suggestions for our students about how they might muster the courage to stand up to bullies or to report someone who's cheating?
Yeah, it's, for all of us, I think we want to be socially popular and stuff, but I'm just not one of those people that, is that concerned about being popular with someone versus doing what's right. And it can be hard in a lot of different social circumstances to do what is right. And I don't know that there's any way to build that in oneself other than to convince yourself that you're going to do what's right when the circumstance occurs.
Well, to that end, someone asked, in your youth, what habits or practice help you develop grit, which is a popular term right now. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think during our childhood and as we're growing up, there's a lot of opportunities to develop that grit and stuff. For me, it came through sports. I was involved in cross country, track, baseball, basketball. Again, from a very small town, so they needed players on the team versus having to try out and make the team and stuff. It wasn't that talented at what I did, but it was through grit, that I was able to contribute to the team and stuff. And it also came into focus in a work sense in the military stuff. Had a senior officer once wanting to test my grit, I guess, while we were running and stuff. And at that particular time, I was injured and not having a particularly easy time running and stuff. But went out with him for a run. The design of where he was going to take me was about 4 miles. When we completed that, he stopped, I continued, and did another lap of 4 miles. And when he was there, he found out where my grit was at. And, particularly in the military, finding out, where a person's grit is at, are they going to give up, is important for all of us, particularly when you're going to give them a leadership position or put them into a circumstance that they can get very tough. And if you go to that July 11th date, 1969, which is when I received the event for which I received the medal and stuff, that's truly all about grit. It's a matter of not giving up, even when things get completely hopeless. You're physically exhausted. You just don't feel like you can go another step. If you can put yourself in the position of realizing the other person's feeling the exact same way, and it is the person that first gives up that's going to lose.
I think that all ties right back in with what you said about the values all being intermingled with each other, because I can't think, for instance, of a sport that requires more commitment than cross country does.
Sure.
And the example that you just gave us was, I'm sure that your cross country experience in high school came into play when you went one lap further than the commanding officer did.
Yes, very much. And again, it needs to be put somewhat in perspective. In 1968, we see a lot of folks today running on the sides of roads and out exercising, which is a good thing to see in our society and stuff. But back then, it was completely unusual. When you're talking about bullying or things like that, I was a very odd-looking person out running on the side of roads when you never saw anybody doing anything like that and stuff, and was the subject of people making a lot of fun of me out there running and stuff like that. People passing in cars, asking if I needed rides, or almost making fun of me for doing that sort of activities.
It sounds like it was greatly to your advantage later. Related to that, someone has asked, what do you see as the single largest character challenge faced by young people today, and what advice would you have for them in trying to overcome it?
Well, and I think there are a lot of challenges today. And of course, I'm an older person at 67 years of age and stuff, and I'm sure most of the young folks out there won't think that I understand much of what they're going through. But I see a society today with all the social media and different social influencers that are out there affecting how they think, what they value, and things like that. It has to produce just enormous challenges to what your normal moral system says is right or wrong and stuff. I didn't have those sorts of things. What we saw was typically very patriotic type movies with Jimmy Stewart and those sort of individuals. We had sports stars and stuff that were typically humble versus braggadocious, as you so often see today. Film stars, music stars, Elvis Presley, which was one of the big musical acts at that time. Well, he was drafted and served in the military. And again, those are the sorts of things that you don't see today and stuff that we had as social influencers that could tell us which was the right direction, I think. How do you rise to that challenge and stuff? Well, I think you look at what the right lessons are and commit yourself to doing those.
Someone asked what you think your main personality trait might be that helped you accomplish the mission that earned you the Medal of Honor. And I think this is a tough question because it sort of asks us to distinguish between values and traits when probably one grows out of the other. But do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, perhaps. And of course, humility, I think, is the one thing I would point out, but not in the sense of that most people might think of that. Humility in the sense that I never thought that I was the best at anything, so that I simply thought I had to work harder in order to achieve what I wanted to achieve. And every time I went to bat, even though as a young baseball player, even though I might dominate a given pitcher as a hitter, I never went to play thinking anything other than this guy's going to strike me out if I don't put my best effort in and really work at it. And I think it's that attitude that has always pushed me forward to making myself, whether it's a soldier, a husband, a father, a member in the community here, a better person at those particular tasks.
Great answer. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Humility is one of the things that often comes up in discussions of the Medal of Honor. And you mentioned in your video that you wear that medal not just for yourself, but for the men you fought with. Which leads sort of to another question. One of our students asked, what does it take to risk your life for others?
Well, again, and part of this is the world I grew up in, a small community and stuff, and the other people in the community were always more important. And there's a thing that occurs every single year for all of us. And right about this time, actually a little bit earlier in the year if you do it when you should, but that's during flu season. All of us have the opportunity to go and get a flu shot. I think there are two groups of people that are getting flu shots. One is getting the flu shot so that they won't get the flu. The other person is getting the shot so that they won't be passing the flu on to someone else. If all of us get the flu shot, this terrible flu season that we've seen this year that has killed so many people, and does every year, frequently doesn't get as much news coverage as it has this year and stuff, but if everyone got the flu shot, we could virtually wipe out every year the flu and the vulnerability that young and old folks alike experience every flu season and all the deaths that occur.
That is a great example. I think that a lot of people, given the nature of shots and their attitudes toward them, and a lot of people being convinced that it will never happen to them, and this flu is outsmarting everybody, it seems.
Yeah, and I think if you live your life that way, it becomes easy when a circumstance comes up, like occurred with me in Vietnam or someplace else, that others is what's more important, and not whether I might have a reaction to a flu shot, but whether or not it protects someone else from it. And when you get into circumstance like so many that we see in the news today and stuff, that the question of which is more important, yours or someone else's life, when you run into that kind of circumstance, well, the other person's what's more important.
Think about that every time I go to get on an airplane, and everybody around me is sick. One of the questions that comes up that fits right in with what you've been talking about, the values that you have, was there anyone in particular who inspired you to become the person you are today? Did you have a particular role model or mentor in your life?
No, and I don't think there's like with many things in life, I don't think there's any singular causal factor for what we do or how we behave or what influences what we want to be and stuff. I had many in my life. Again, a whole community of World War II veterans that would march down the streets on every holiday and taking such pride in what they were able to do for our country. My school teachers who dedicated themselves to making sure that I got the quality of education that I should get, and up to even today. And watching many of our political, military, and civic leaders, they're doing such great things with a lot of courage and stuff that they don't frequently get credit for and stuff, but is important to us.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to switch gears a little bit because we have an interesting collection of questions here that are related again to your service and also tie in with what we're doing today. We obviously are using technology exclusively today because there are only 3 of us in this room from which we're broadcasting, and then there's a group elsewhere who is making things happen in the background, and then there's the audience, those of you who are all over the country. Someone asked, what was it like moving around during military operations when you were in Vietnam with no GPS?
And that's something that's an excellent question, first of all, and stuff, because that change and stuff has made such a great difference in the military. As I said, I just retired in 2012. And during the years when we were transitioning to GPS versus the old compass and map methods of transporting ourselves as well as maneuvering and stuff, I used to make fun of those that really had not learned their navigation skills using things like maps and compasses and things like that. And what I can tell you is it's very difficult. It's almost an art versus a skill, particularly in certain types of landscapes. If you get into the desert and places where you can't really see any prominent terrain features and things that you can run a compass line off of to try and isolate exactly where you're at, it can be very difficult. And in a jungle where you can't see very far, it's very hard to navigate using maps and compasses as well. And stuff. GPS has changed all that, but like with anything, GPS, whether it's power failures or whatever, can go down, and you still need those old skills to be able to get yourself from point A to point B. In the military now, I mean, we have the exact same systems that you have in a car and stuff. You plug in the address you're going to. It's not typically not an address, but a GPS coordinate and stuff. And the computer system and the screens on there guide you right up to where you need to go. So.
Gives a whole different meaning to not having cell service, doesn't it?
It does.
My dad was, like your dad, was in World War II, and we still have a cloth map that he had sewn into his jacket when they landed in Normandy. And I don't know how they could even see to read that kind of a map, let alone, in the dark, in the bushes and such. So now we have another very closely related question, which is what type of computers and technology did you use during your early time in the military? And so we're talking from 1968, and then you retired in 2012?
That's correct.
So I guess maybe this question is really about what kinds of changes did you see over that career in the military?
Yeah, when we started, when I first went in the military in 1968, there was very little in the way of technology like that. For the most part, we used starlight scopes, which was a big advancement at that time. Starlight scopes being a telescope that operated off of starlight, moonlight, any small amount of light you were able to see a bit and stuff. Now today, that's routine technology. Back then, that was a 40-pound item that you had to carry around with you to be able to see with it. So its value was limited in terms of you're being able to transport it, and particularly when you're walking on your feet and stuff all the time. But as it advanced, we went through everything just like everyone else. The difference being in the military, a lot of times we're on the cutting edge of technology, things like email, things like that. We were using far in advance of most of the people out here in the private sector and stuff. The systems were pretty clunky. Had a lot of breakdowns. Computer systems themselves and stuff weren't as reliable as they are now and stuff. But go to the military now, I mean, it's as advanced as anything you'll see in society. It's almost like going on to one of Apple's campuses out on the West Coast.
Wow. Now, when was your last deployment?
I returned home in 2012 from Kuwait.
Okay. So could you perhaps tell us a little more what it was like then with what you had in the way of the computer technology and such? For instance, were you able to stay in touch while you were deployed that time with Alyssa?
Yeah, very much, and that's a great example actually. When I deployed to Vietnam, the only communication you had was vis-a-vis snail mail or regular mail system and stuff, other than what was called Mars, and Mars was simply a collection of amateur radio folks around the world and stuff that would transmit your radio to a telephone through some system that they were using. Stuff. So I was able to call home once from Vietnam using the Mars system and stuff, and you had to do things like say over and things like that, and trying to teach your rather elderly mom at that point how to do that was a bit difficult, and when you had a 5-minute phone call time limit. But in 2004, when we deployed to Iraq, or I took my battalion to Iraq and stuff, we had a sort of technology that, of course, you could email pretty consistently and stuff like that, and make occasional phone calls home. And when I say occasional, 2-3 times a week for most of the soldiers. Wow. And stuff that had the time to do that and stuff. To the point now where it's advanced enough that a lot of the soldiers deployed can Skype home with their families and stuff and be more present and stuff. If there's one truly great difficulty that occurred in Vietnam and stuff, it's being away from them. It's just not the distance, it's the ocean of time that every soldier has to go through, missing birthdays, missing, that first pitch, for their kids in Little League, their first ball game, those sorts of things, which are very, very difficult, and even the birth of a child. With the technology we have today, even though it certainly doesn't replace the person being there, it does help, when the father and mother and stuff can see their kids on the screen, tell them how much they love them, and congratulate them on whatever's going on.
That's a great example for us. So many of us take that for granted today. I know I have a 2-year-old grandson, and if I'm not around, I can chat with him and as best he can chat. And that's something that, and especially our fathers didn't have when they were in World War II. The flip side, though, is that while you didn't have that day-to-day conversation, I bet that your mom kept every letter you wrote home when you had letters, and the technology tends to go away. So there are different things at different times. To that end, an interesting question just came in. Someone asked, do you think soldiers needed more courage in previous years before the technology, the GPS, that sort of thing?
No, probably not. Soldiers need courage regardless of what circumstances, and that's the one thing I've seen. As a Vietnam veteran, going into Iraq and things, it's a very different war and stuff, and certainly the number of casualties that were occurring, even though high and always tragic when they do occur, were so much smaller than what they were in Vietnam and stuff. But the courage required to get into the armored vehicles and to move out, knowing that the IEDs are out there and stuff, even though it's less of a likelihood that you're going to get hurt than what you would have seen in Vietnam and stuff. It doesn't change. And if there's any advantage, the technology perhaps can get you by a little bit easier and with a little less concern and stuff, but not that much.
And probably help to get you out faster if you are hurt, which is probably why we see people surviving so many truly significant injuries.
Yeah, and it's why we see the traumatic amputation of arms, legs, things like that as kind of the signature wounds or injuries of this particular war. They occurred in every war, but most of the times when you had that kind of injury, the person would bleed out, or the injury would simply be too bad for them to be able to survive for the length of time it took to get them back to the kind of definitive medical care that they would need. Stuff. Today, it's literally a matter of minutes. When our convoys were attacked in Iraq, it typically would take us anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes to literally have that soldier on a surgery table back at a hospital.
And much of that, of course, much of that credit goes to helicopters and the people who fly them, which when our parents were in World War II, they didn't even have helicopters.
But we've always had those. The technology to be able to communicate and to get them there as quickly as possible. I guess.
Makes a huge difference. To step back a little bit from the war, someone asked, how did you get assigned to the same unit as your father was in World War II?
Yeah, it's not something I requested.
Oh, really?
No.
Just happened?
It just occurred when I arrived in Vietnam. And again, Vietnam was quite different than World War II and quite different than the war on terrorism that we see today. In both those wars, soldiers deployed with their unit. Okay, and they deploy with their unit today. These are people that they've trained with, that they know, and things like that. In Vietnam, it was different in terms of we went in as individual replacements for individuals that were either rotating home, have been injured, wounded, or have died. We as an individual would be assigned a unit. Because I was a paratrooper, the unit was needing replacements the most at that time was 101st Airborne Division, which was the same one my father was in. And so that's what I was sent to.
So did that make a difference, being sent in as individuals to replace? Do you think that made a difference in your ability to build a sense of brotherhood? One of the things I hear consistently in talking with Medal of Honor recipients is the brotherhood. Were you able to build it rather quickly as opposed to those who were traveling the world with that same group of individuals?
No, not at all. And I think this is easy for anyone to be able to think through without having to go through the circumstance. But if you simply think of your high school football team or something like that, how well they do as a team because they've been playing as a team for an entire season and stuff. That's what occurs. But then think of the All-Star game where there's only one or two individuals from each team which were selected for the All-Star teams and stuff like that. And they typically, even though this is the best of the best players, don't play all that well. And that's because they haven't practiced together, they haven't lived together, they haven't learned each person's talents and weaknesses and things like that. Same thing occurs in the military. Every individual brings some strength to the unit, and you utilize that strength to build a greater whole than any individual is and stuff. And to practicing and things like that and living with one another and stuff, you build truly a strong, cohesive team. In Vietnam, we didn't have that, and the worst part of that is that even if you tried to develop that kind of team and do the kind of training and stuff that was necessary to develop it and stuff, there was continuously someone always leaving. They'd be leaving because their year was up and it was time for them to go home. And again, death or injury and stuff was so prevalent that I think we're not on July 11th, again, when the event occurred for which I received the Medal of Honor, there was only 2 people in my squad that had been there when I arrived, which was only 2 months before. And so 10 folks, only 3 of us knew one another reasonably well at all.
To point out to our students who may not have studied all these various parts of history in detail yet, to give a little perspective on that, my dad and his older brother joined the service together and were in the same squad from the time that they enlisted in 1940 through basic training and through the invasion of North Africa and the invasion of Sicily, which put them together for over 3 years before they were separated and put into different squads. So that kind of gives you a perspective on just how different that is. Do you think that the nature of this team building or lack thereof is part of why they have gone back to sending squads together in the war on terror, or is it also because of the difference in having had and now not having the draft?
Well, no, I think the biggest piece, it was one of those lessons learned from Vietnam. We did a lot of things wrong in Vietnam, but the military leadership it is so insisted upon now, as an example. Typically, my command time as a battalion commander would have only been 24 months in length. But because my unit that I was commanding was scheduled to deploy at my 18th month mark, they elected to keep me there. So instead of doing 24 months, I ended up doing 36 months of command time, which is what everybody wants to do. But and normally the military would switch you out if this was an administrative thing and stuff. But they're so insistent that the soldiers, as well as the leadership, are all part of one team and that they stay together through the entire time period, that they will go beyond what is normally a very sacrosanct standard of you do battalion command for 24 months. The reason it's limited like that is so that the next person gets the opportunity to do that as well.
I think that's a good example for our students and teachers to be aware of, that while many of us as students and as teachers, I was a teacher for several decades, many of us may not care for group work. Group work is extremely important because in the real world it comes into play, and it's important to draw on each other's strengths and weaknesses and the bond that comes amongst people. This you've addressed somewhat, but someone asked, what's the most significant change you saw during your time in the military? I sprung that one on us.
Yeah, no. I think the one clear difference beyond anything else is that when the draft went away and stuff, the Army was able to draw upon, really the best and the brightest of our society and stuff. With the volunteer Army, they now offer the kinds of bonuses and different inducements to get the quality of folks that they need. And the young folks we have now, are just so talented. And as an example, as a full colonel in the Army and stuff, I frequently relied on specialist privates, different folks, because of the talents they brought with them, not just what the Army had trained and stuff. And to the degree of, I looked at them as a peer, not as a subordinate of mine, but literally as a peer capable of doing things that can truly affect the warfight and stuff. So that's the one difference. Back in 1968, it seemed like we were just a bunch of all dumb hicks. They were all put out there in the military to do some very basic things, and all trained on those very basic things. And then we didn't bring things with us. The military now, when it looks at young folks coming in, at least hopefully the enlightened leadership sees what a diverse and very talented group of people that come and how much they can do for their country just with the skills that they have.
That's an important note for our students who are with us today to pay attention to, and that some of you may have relatives who can tell the story, and I hear this oftentimes when I interview veterans, that some veterans got into the service not because they chose to join or because they were drafted, but what was at the time a third option, which was they were given the option of either going to jail or going into the service. And that is no longer an option. You not only need to have a clean record, but you also need to have some decent grades and bring with you the skills that we're talking about. And to that end, someone just asked, when a military unit is put together, are people selected based on abilities? Is there an effort to create a mix of personality types and skills?
The answer to that's kind of all the above and stuff. Certain units do look to try and select folks based upon their specific abilities. Special forces groups come to mind and stuff where we have very specifically trained team members, some in medical, some in ordnance or explosives, some in weaponry and different things like that and stuff. So they bring those skills with them, and that's critically important. Other units and stuff, what we look to do is really put together a diverse group of folks and build the team, with all those individual abilities that they bring along with them. So frequently I found the latter is the better way to go. We think we know, hey, I need this, and so forth and so on. When you get into a place like Iraq and you're having to replace a well for water, you're having to rebuild a school, you're having to install solar so that they got some electrical power and stuff. this diverse group of folks somehow can come together, and cumulatively that brain power will get the job of picking the trash up in the community and teaching the community how to do that reliably so it continues on after we're there. It's that diverse group of individuals that can get that job done. Whereas, I'm a very highly trained rifleman and stuff like that. Well, that skill on its own doesn't do anything to accomplish those missions. And frequently when we're out there, that's the sort of things that you got to look at and stuff. Yes, we have the combat mission and stuff, but the objective of war at any time is for a better peace. And people really have to keep that ultimate objective in mind. That better peace means the folks that are there need to have something that's better in their lives, not just ours here in the United States, but worldwide.
The objective of war is a better peace. I think that probably many of our students think in terms, when they see someone in uniform, they probably think mainly in terms of war and of battle. And I want to point out to our students that you just mentioned digging wells, basics of life, building schools, getting the community to pick up their trash. There was something else that they were building there. That seems to be a huge difference in what we see in the media about war and what is the reality of today's military. Is that true?
Yeah, very much. And there's senior leadership of the military would object to my saying, and pretty much anybody saying that nation building is one of the primary objectives that we have as a military. But in essence, that is what it is. So when you look at Iraq or Afghanistan, a government needs to be stood up. All the daily services and stuff that the people need and stuff need to be in place. Otherwise, the people are going to object, to what you've left behind there and stuff. And it isn't just war zones. I've deployed to Haiti twice. Some of the worst third world countries in the world that you'll see and stuff. And what do people need most, aside from the law and order and the things that you establish initially once you go in as a military, is all those basic things that are out there in life. But it isn't just a matter of digging them a well and stuff like that. We obviously have that capability and do that quite easily. But maintaining the well. It isn't just building them a school or repairing one that's been damaged because of battle or something like that. But it's putting that school back in place, making sure that they know how to keep books, current books, available for the education. All these things are very simple and something that we're used to and frequently take for granted and stuff. But what I would encourage folks to do is to think about themselves and go, what if you never had hot water? One of those small conveniences we take for granted and stuff, it runs in our houses and there's no difficulty with it and stuff. But think of not having it and realize that what a difference it makes for those people. And the development of what I said is the objective of war, which is a better peace.
And I think when you mentioned that the objective is that you might be criticized for saying the development of nations, but it's not a matter of us developing our nation there, but rather helping them to develop their own nation so that it's a better place for them to live.
Right. And the example that I use, and hopefully everyone can understand it, it's biblical almost in nature and stuff. We don't give people fish, we teach people to fish. We try and make it so that person can sustain themselves on their own, which is what they want, as well as what we should want in the end. There needs to be initial aid, initial assistance that may be heavily tilted towards our efforts to start with, but they need to evolve to the point of, again, where they learn to fish versus being given the fish.
But this complexity of our involvement in other countries, as you said, both with the combat mission and the humanitarian mission, certainly points out that need for people of many diverse skills and personalities, and probably part of the reason that the military is more particular than it used to be about who they're putting in there. One student, sort of to that end, from Alabama, hello Alabama, says, wants to know where you completed military training and what military training was like for you. You mentioned you were trained specifically as a rifleman.
Yes, my training, in fact, if you're from Alabama, very close to there, I was on the border of Alabama, Georgia, at Fort Benning, Georgia, which was where I went through my initial basic training and advanced infantry training. Also went through jump school there and stuff. In terms of all the training and stuff, went to everything from, officer advanced course to general staff and college command and staff, school out at Fort Leavenworth,
Wow.
To the War College at Fort Leavenworth. But probably the most important training that I received was simply being in units. You learn more day to day, working a variety of jobs and stuff. And the one thing that you'll see in the military, as you do in most businesses or most schools, most different places, is people get a certain type of job, and that's kind of where they stay for the rest of their lives and stuff. That's the one thing I didn't want to do. I worked everything from personnel to logistics to different command times and things of that nature. I wanted to learn all the different pieces to the units that I was involved with, because it isn't just about going out and pulling the triggers as a rifleman. It's also about the logistics guys that gets those the ammunition so that your weapons will work. They get you the food, they get you all the different pieces. So I've even commanded the mess hall at one time and stuff. Voluntarily.
Hungry soldiers can't fight.
Right, and voluntarily, so that I understand all the difficulties of that and stuff. With hope for, as I grew in rank and eventually became a colonel, that I had a better understanding of what those individuals are going through. So there's one thing I want to encourage everyone to do, and that's with their education or anything else, is experience the biggest variety you possibly can, because it will be of great utility to you later in life.
Thank you so much. We have answered a great many questions today. I want to throw out a quick hello to Federal Way High School, Air Force, JROTC, and hello to Hesperia Topaz 6th grade class who's watching live with us today. And thank all the other teachers who are watching live with us today as well. We've had some great interaction from students who are writing in. I really appreciate that. Do you have anything you'd like to add for our students before we wrap up here?
No, in an hour, of course, we're just kind of touching the tip of the iceberg.
Does that mean you'll come back and do this again?
And I would be more than glad to. I've always enjoyed talking to young folks and stuff, and learning from young folks, because it's your questions and your thoughts. The one thing about this format that I don't like is that I'm not able to ask you back the same questions that you ask me and stuff, in terms of what do you think it takes to be courageous in a given circumstance and stuff like that, because I found the way I was able to do things well in those areas that I have been able to do things well is when I ask myself those questions, of what would you do and stuff. And because I'd answered that question before the 11th of July, 1969, I was able to do what I did.
That is an extremely important observation at a time when so often we see posts on social media that say, what would somebody do? Any number of people, oftentimes media people, and sometimes it's meant to be a joke, but that was very serious and a great observation. And if you want to check on your values, ask yourself what you would do. Thank you so much for that. We are pretty much at the end of our hour here, so I have a few details to send on to our teachers and who are watching. I want to thank you, Colonel Roberts, so much for the time that you've spent with us. For our teachers who are looking to get a continuing education certificate, it will be mailed to you after 24 hours if you pre-registered and logged in today with your email address, and that's even if you switched to phone. If you're watching after the fact, you need to take the continuing education quiz. So to find out more information, go to www.edweb.net and you'll be able to get that information. For information about the Congressional Medal of Honor Foundation, to be able to view Colonel Roberts' video and to get information about the Medal of Honor Character Development Program and to access the actual curriculum, it is available on our website at themedalofhonor.com. Teachers, students, parents, the curriculum is all there for you to look at. We have elementary and secondary programs available for you. You can also on there watch our archived webinar interviews with other Medal of Honor recipients, and you can sign up for a live training event in your area. And more importantly, if you would like a training event for teachers in your area and there is not one listed on our website, you may reach out to us and we will see what we can do to work with you to schedule one in your area. The next webinar that we are doing with EdWeb and the Medal of Honor is scheduled for Tuesday, April 10th, and that will be an interview with Patrick Brady, helicopter pilot, dust-off, rescue pilot from Vietnam. So please join us for that. And then the following, please also put on your calendar, the following month, in May 8th, we will be interviewing Kyle White, who was a staff sergeant in the War on Terror. So please look at our website, check the dates, and put on your calendars when you can join us for the next live webinars. Colonel Roberts, thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.